My father stood in the center of his backyard party, scotch in hand, and told his college buddies that I'd dropped out of school and now worked retail, a disappointment he'd learned to accept. I was standing 15 feet away, still in my scrubs from a 12-hour shift where I'd just saved a 7-year-old's life during emergency surgery. The truth was, I hadn't spoken to my father in 3 years. Not since the day he told me I wasn't smart enough for medical school and that I shouldn't be realistic about my future. And he had no idea that Dr. Sarah Hayes, the cardiothoracic surgeon, was his daughter. Before I tell you how one birthday party destroyed a man's pride and rebuilt a daughter's peace, tell me, have you ever let someone believe you failed just so you could prove to yourself that their opinion never mattered? My name is Sarah Hayes, and I became a doctor to save lives, not to prove anything to my father. But standing in his backyard in Austin, Texas, watching him lie about my life to people who'd known me since I was 7, I realized that sometimes the truth arrives whether you invite it or not. Growing up, I was the daughter who asked too many questions. Why does the heart have 4 chambers? What makes cells divide? How does anesthesia actually work? My father, Richard Hayes, was a successful personal injury attorney who believed in exactly 2 paths for his children: law or business. My older brother Marcus chose law. I chose biology. Sarah, be realistic, Dad said when I told him I wanted to be a doctor. I was 17, sitting in his home office surrounded by his framed degrees and awards. Medical school is incredibly competitive. You're a B student. Maybe look into nursing or medical administration. I stared at him, waiting for the smile that would tell me he was joking. It never came. I'm a B student because I work 20 hours a week to save for college, I said quietly. My biology teacher says I have real potential. He sighed, the way you sigh at a child who insists they can fly. Teachers are supposed to be encouraging, sweetheart. I'm giving you realistic advice. You're smart enough for a good career, just not that career. That conversation planted something cold and hard in my chest. Not anger, something quieter. Determination with roots that went deep. I applied to 15 universities. I got into 12. I chose the University of Washington, as far from Austin as I could get without leaving the country. Dad paid for the first semester, then called me in October. I looked at your course schedule. You're taking organic chemistry and advanced biology? Sarah, we talked about this. I'm not paying for you to chase some fantasy. Switch to business or pay for it yourself. I switched to paying for it myself. I worked 3 jobs, tutored students in chemistry, waited tables at a diner near campus, and cleaned laboratory equipment on weekends. I slept 4 hours a night and drank coffee that tasted like regret. My grades went from B's to A's because I was too tired to be distracted by anything except survival. Marcus called me once during sophomore year. Dad says you dropped out. Is that true? No, I said, studying flashcards while stirring pasta on my apartment's tiny stove. I'm still here. Dean's List last semester. Then why would he say that? Because to him, if he's not paying for it, it doesn't exist. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. You should call him, Sarah. He's your father. He was my father, I corrected. Now he's just the man who told me I wasn't good enough. I stopped going home for holidays. I stopped answering his calls. When I got into medical school at Johns Hopkins, I sent the acceptance letter to my mother, who'd divorced Dad when I was 19. She cried on the phone for 10 minutes and asked if I needed money. I told her I had scholarships and loans and pride, and that was enough. Medical school was 4 years of controlled drowning. Every exam felt like proof that Dad was right, that I wasn't smart enough, disciplined enough, tough enough. Then I'd pass. Then I'd excel. Then I'd stand in an operating room watching a heart surgeon repair an aortic dissection and think, this is why I'm here. I specialized in cardiothoracic surgery because it was the hardest thing I could choose. Because every heart I held in my hands was proof that I was exactly smart enough, disciplined enough, tough enough. My residency was at Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston. 80-hour weeks, impossible cases, attendings who yelled and patients who died, and moments of grace so profound they made you believe in something bigger than yourself. I became the surgeon who got called for the hardest cases, the one who stayed calm when everyone else panicked. In my 3rd year of residency, I was called in for an emergency. 17-year-old car accident victim, steering wheel to the chest, heart barely pumping. I spent 6 hours in that OR, hands steady, mind clear, and when the kid's heart started beating strong and regular, the attending surgeon, Dr. Morrison, pulled down his mask and said, "Dr. Hayes, that was some of the finest surgery I've seen in 20 years." I went home that night, sat in my tiny Boston apartment, and cried. Not because it was hard. Because for the first time since my father told me I wasn't good enough, I knew with absolute certainty that he'd been wrong. I didn't tell my family about my residency completion. I didn't tell them when I was offered a position at Austin Medical Center. I moved back to Texas because it was a great hospital with cutting-edge cardiac programs, not because it was 20 minutes from my father's house. 3 years I worked there. 3 years of saving lives, teaching residents, publishing research. 3 years of building a reputation as one of the best young cardiac surgeons in the state. And in all that time, I never reached out to my father. My mother knew. She'd come to my white coat ceremony, to my residency graduation, to my first day at Austin Medical. She kept my secrets because I'd asked her to. "Let him think what he wants to think," I told her. "It doesn't matter anymore." But it did matter. It mattered every time I heard his voice in my head during a difficult surgery. It mattered every time a patient's family thanked me, and I thought about the family that had written me off. It mattered in the quiet moments when I wondered if proving him wrong had become more important than actually succeeding. The invitation to Dad's 60th birthday party came through Marcus. "He wants you there, Sarah. He won't say it, but he does." "Does he even know where I am? What I do?" Marcus hesitated. "He thinks you're working retail somewhere. He told me you probably live in Seattle, that you gave up on school." I laughed, the sound sharp and humorless. "And you didn't correct him?" "I tried. He didn't want to hear it. You know how he is." I knew exactly how he was. That was the problem. I almost didn't go to the party. I had a surgery scheduled that morning, a valve replacement on a 52-year-old teacher. But the surgery went well, finished early, and I found myself driving toward my father's house still in my scrubs, my hospital ID badge still clipped to my collar. The party was in full swing when I arrived. The backyard was full of people I recognized from childhood, Dad's lawyer friends and their perfectly polished wives, neighbors who'd watched me grow up. Catering tables lined one side, a bar on the other, everything expensive and tasteful in that way my father had always valued. I stood near the back fence, partially hidden by a magnolia tree, just watching. Dad looked older, grayer, but still stood with that same confident posture he'd always had. Still holding court, still the center of attention. Then I heard him talking to a group of his college friends. They were asking about his kids, the way people do at these things. "Marcus is doing great," Dad said, pride clear in his voice, "making partner at his firm next year, following in the old man's footsteps." "And your daughter?" someone asked. "Sarah, right? What's she up to?" Dad's expression shifted, just slightly. The smile stayed but went hollow. "Sarah dropped out of college. Works retail, I think. Walmart or Target, something like that." He took a long sip of his scotch. "It's a disappointment, honestly. I tried to guide her toward something realistic, but she was always stubborn. Had to learn the hard way that dreams don't pay bills." The group made sympathetic noises. One woman touched his arm. "That must be so hard for you, Richard." "You learn to accept it," he said with practiced resignation. "Some kids just don't have what it takes for professional success. At least Marcus turned out well." I stood there, frozen, feeling like that 17-year-old girl in his office all over again. The one who wasn't good enough, smart enough, realistic enough. Except now I was 32, and I'd spent the morning repairing a damaged heart valve with hands that didn't shake and a mind that didn't doubt. I should have left. I should have walked away and let him keep believing his version of my life. But then Dr. Morrison walked through the back gate. Dr. James Morrison, chief of cardiothoracic surgery at Austin Medical Center, was a legend. He'd trained at the Mayo Clinic, published over 200 papers, and had a reputation for being brilliant and brutally honest. He was also my mentor, the attending who'd pushed me harder than anyone, and then stood in front of the hospital board to advocate for my hiring. He saw me immediately, his face breaking into a surprised smile. He walked straight over, weaving through clusters of party guests. "Dr. Hayes," he said warmly, pulling me into a brief hug. "I didn't know you'd be here. Wait." He looked around, confused. "Whose party is this?" My voice came out steady, though my heart was pounding. "My father's. Richard Hayes." Dr. Morrison's expression shifted to understanding, then something like anger. "Your father? The one who—" "Yeah," I said quietly. "That one." The conversation behind us had stopped. I felt my father's attention like a physical weight. Dr. Morrison turned toward the group, his voice carrying across the yard. "Richard Hayes?" he called out. "Are you Richard Hayes?" Dad stepped forward, lawyer smile in place, hand extended. "I am. And you are?" "Dr. James Morrison. I'm the chief of cardiothoracic surgery at Austin Medical Center." He shook Dad's hand, then gestured to me. "I work with your daughter. Dr. Hayes is one of the finest cardiac surgeons I've had the privilege of training." The color drained from my father's face. "I'm sorry, what?" "Your daughter," Dr. Morrison repeated, looking genuinely confused by Dad's confusion. "Dr. Sarah Hayes. She just completed her residency under my supervision and is now on staff at our hospital. She's being considered for chief resident next year. You must be incredibly proud." The backyard had gone completely silent. Every conversation died. Every eye turned toward us. Dad looked at me, really looked at me for the first time since I'd arrived. His eyes traveled from my face to my scrubs, to the hospital badge clipped to my collar that read, "Dr. Sarah Hayes, cardiothoracic surgery." "Sarah?" His voice cracked on my name. I met his eyes, calm and steady, the way I'd learned to be in the OR when everything was going wrong. "Hi, Dad. Happy birthday." "You're a doctor?" He said it like he was testing the words, like they might be a foreign language. "Cardiothoracic surgeon, actually. I operate on hearts, valves, bypasses, transplants. I specialize in complex congenital defects." I kept my tone professional, distant. "I finished medical school at Johns Hopkins 3 years ago. Been working at Austin Medical since then." Marcus pushed through the crowd, his face a mixture of shock and something else. "You're a surgeon? Sarah, why didn't you tell anyone?" I told Mom, and I tried to tell Dad, but he was busy explaining why I wasn't capable of medical school. Eventually, I stopped trying. Dr. Morrison looked between us, understanding dawning. "Wait, you didn't know?" "Richard, your daughter is one of the most talented surgeons I've seen in my 30-year career. She saved a kid's life just this morning. A valve replacement that 3 other surgeons said was too risky. Sarah did it in under 4 hours with perfect results." Dad just stared at me. The scotch glass hung forgotten in his hand. I stepped closer, keeping my voice low enough that only our immediate group could hear. "You told them I dropped out, that I work retail, that I'm a disappointment you've learned to accept." I paused, letting him hear his own words reflected back. "But I didn't drop out, Dad. You did." "Sarah, he started. "You dropped out of my life the second I didn't follow your script," I continued. "You dropped out of being proud of me when I chose biology over law. You dropped me the day you said I wasn't good enough and stopped paying my tuition." His hand shook, just slightly. "I didn't know." "You didn't ask." The words came out harder than I intended. "Not once in 3 years did you call and ask what I was actually doing. You just made up a story that fit your narrative and told it to anyone who'd listen." Marcus touched my arm. "Sarah, he tried to call. I told you." "He called once," I interrupted. My second year of college, to tell me I was wasting my life. I was on the dean's list, working 3 jobs, taking 20 credits a semester, and he called to tell me I was failing. I looked back at Dad, so I stopped answering, and apparently you filled in the blanks with whatever made you feel better about giving up on me. One of Dad's friends cleared his throat awkwardly. We should give you folks some privacy. The crowd dispersed quickly, conversations resuming in hushed tones. The party continued around us, but we stood in a bubble of uncomfortable truth. Dr. Morrison squeezed my shoulder. I'll leave you to talk. Sarah, you did beautiful work today. Don't forget that. He nodded at my father. Richard, your daughter is exceptional. Maybe actually get to know her before deciding what she's worth. After he left, it was just the 3 of us. Me, Marcus, and the father who'd written me off. 3 years, Dad finally said. You've been here for 3 years and you never told me. Why would I? So you could take credit? Tell people how you always knew I'd make it? I shook my head. I needed to do this without you. I needed to prove to myself that your opinion of me didn't matter. And did you? His voice was rough. Prove it? I thought about the morning's surgery, about the kid whose life I'd saved, about the 3 years of impossible cases and sleepless nights and moments of pure grace in the OR. Yeah, I said quietly. I proved it. Marcus looked between us. This is insane. Sarah, you should have told us. We're family. Family shows up, I said. Family believes in you. Family doesn't tell people you're a disappointment when they haven't bothered to check if you're still breathing. Dad's face crumpled then, age lines deepening, eyes going red. I was wrong, he said, voice breaking. Sarah, I was so wrong. About everything. I thought I was protecting you from failure. But I was just... He stopped, swallowed hard. I was projecting my own fears onto you. Your fears? I asked. I wanted to be a doctor, he said quietly. When I was your age, but I wasn't brave enough to try. I chose law because it was safer, because my father said medicine was too hard. And when you said you wanted medical school, all I could see was my own failure. So I tried to save you from the disappointment I never faced because I was too scared to try. The admission hung in the air between us. I hadn't expected that. Hadn't expected him to actually examine why he'd been so determined to crush my dream. So you crushed mine instead, I said softly. I did, he admitted. And I don't know how to undo that. I don't know how to take back 3 years of lies, of assumptions, of telling people my daughter failed when she was out saving lives. I stood there, looking at my father, seeing him clearly maybe for the first time. Not as the towering figure of my childhood or the villain of my medical school years, but as a flawed man who'd let his own regrets poison his daughter's dreams. You can't undo it, I said finally. But you can stop doing it. You can stop telling people I'm a disappointment. You can stop projecting your failures onto my success. And maybe, if you actually mean it, you can start asking me about my life instead of making one up. He nodded, tears on his cheeks now. I'm proud of you, he whispered. God, Sarah, I'm so proud I can barely breathe. And I don't deserve to say that. I know I don't. But it's true. I felt something crack in my chest, not breaking but shifting. 3 years of armor, of distance, of not needing his approval. It didn't disappear, but it loosened, just slightly. I saved a kid's life this morning, I said. 7 years old. Congenital defect they said was inoperable. I held his heart in my hands and fixed it, and when he woke up and smiled at his mom, I thought, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Not because you believed in me, but because I believed in myself enough for both of us. Dad wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Can I ask about your work? Maybe see the hospital sometime? I want to understand what you do. I studied him, looking for the catch, the condition, the inevitable disappointment. But all I saw was a 60-year-old man realizing he'd spent years lying about his daughter's life because the truth made him face his own limitations. Maybe, I said. But not because you're trying to make up for being a bad father. Because you actually want to know who I am now. I do, he said immediately. I really do. Marcus, who'd been silent through all of this, spoke up. For what it's worth, little sister, I think you're incredible. And I'm sorry I didn't push harder to find out what was really happening. I smiled at him, tired but genuine. You believed Dad's story. Everyone did. It was easier than asking hard questions. No more, Marcus said firmly. No more easy stories. The party continued around us, but somehow the night felt different. Lighter. Several of Dad's friends approached carefully, asking real questions now. What kind of surgeries did I do? How long had I been practicing? Could I tell them about the morning's operation? I answered them all, watching my father stand silently nearby, listening to his daughter talk about saving lives while he processed the reality he'd spent 3 years denying. As the party wound down and guests started leaving, Dad caught my arm. Sarah, would you consider having dinner? Just the two of us? I want to hear everything, and I want to apologize properly, not because it'll fix things, but because you deserve to hear it. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to walk away, to let him sit with his regrets the way I'd sat with his rejection. But another part, the part that had become a doctor to heal things that were broken, wondered if maybe some wounds could be addressed even if they couldn't fully heal. One dinner, I said. And Dad? No more lies about me. No more making up stories because the truth makes you uncomfortable. If people ask about your daughter, you tell them I'm a cardiac surgeon. Or you say nothing at all. I promise, he said. And Sarah? I know I don't have the right to say this, but I really am proud. Not of me for being your father. Of you, for becoming who you are despite me. I nodded and walked to my car. As I drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror and saw him standing in the driveway, watching me leave. This stranger who was learning who his daughter actually was. That dinner happened 2 weeks later. Dad asked careful questions and actually listened to the answers. He didn't try to take credit or offer advice. He just listened to me talk about bypass surgeries and research projects and the resident I was mentoring who reminded me of myself. At the end of the night, he handed me an envelope. Inside was a check for the exact amount of tuition he'd refused to pay, plus interest. I can't undo what I did, he said. But I can acknowledge what it cost you. This isn't payment. It's recognition that you did something incredible without my support, and that was both harder and more impressive than anything I've ever done. I looked at the check, at this man trying to make amends with money because he didn't have words big enough for his regret. I don't need this, I said. I know. That's why I'm giving it. Not because you need it, but because I need you to know that I see now what I cost you, and I'm sorry. I took the check and donated it to a scholarship fund for first-generation medical students. Students whose families didn't believe in them. Students who needed someone to say, "You're good enough," even when the people who were supposed to say it first had failed them. My relationship with my father isn't fixed. You don't repair 3 years of absence and lies with one dinner and a check. But we're learning. He comes to the hospital sometimes, watches from the observation deck when I operate, tries to understand the life he almost convinced me I couldn't have. And sometimes, when a surgery goes perfectly and a heart beats strong under my hands, I think about that birthday party, about Dr. Morrison walking in and saying my name with respect, about my father's face when he realized his daughter hadn't failed, she'd simply succeeded without him. They say success is the best revenge, but I learned that success isn't about proving people wrong. It's about proving yourself right. I didn't become a surgeon to show my father he'd underestimated me. I became a surgeon because saving lives was who I was meant to be. The fact that it proved him wrong was just a bonus. If you've ever been told you're not good enough by someone who was supposed to believe in you, know this. Their doubt doesn't define your potential. It just defines their limits. And sometimes, the best thing you can do is succeed so thoroughly, so completely, that when the truth finally comes out, all they can do is stand there and realize they were wrong about everything that mattered.